I'm a writer with VentureBeat, one of the tech blogs here, and I'm really happy to come in and talk with these fine people. By the way, there was a last-minute change, so my name wasn't in the booklet. Anyway, we have many people whose names are on the booklet, and they have done some great things in terms of investing in startups. And so I think before we go further, let's just introduce everyone. And we can start just to my left with Siobhan.
Sure, introduce and tell a little bit about investments, funds,
Why don't we start just with your role at the firm, and then we'll talk about what you've done there later.
Sure. So my name's Siobhan Zillis. I'm a partner in an early stage fund called Bloomberg Beta.
I'll take that. Bilal Zuberi, partner at a fund called Lux Capital, based here in Palo Alto, well, close to here in Palo Alto, and in New York City.
Hi, I'm Abi Arunachalam. I'm an enterprise investor at Battery Ventures, which is a global multi-billion-dollar VC firm, and deeply interested in artificial intelligence and deep learning companies.
I'm Nikolai Wadstrom, founder of Boost Up Labs. We're located actually in this building, and we're an early stage venture capital firm focused on applied artificial intelligence.
Cool. I've only met Siobhan before, so I'm really happy to be with you guys today. And I get to write about cloud infrastructure, big data, enterprise, and the Microsoft Reporter and the Apple Reporter. But so much of those areas are being touched by AI specifically. And so I'm always on the lookout for the next big company, so to speak. But I don't want to go too far without asking about the nature of the audience. So I wonder if you are a founder, can you raise your hand? Okay, wow. Nice. And how about investors? Okay. Technical people? Okay, good mix. Cool. Okay, now we know. So I guess the big thing that it sort of makes sense if you think about history is to ask why there is so much interest in artificial intelligence now, given all of the history. Like, why now?
Go first. We'll go the opposite way.
So why now? Okay. Well, I think there's a lot of interest because of a number of factors. I think it's become feasible to apply artificial intelligence in a way that you couldn't do before. I think there's a lot of interest because we have some real problems, some really painful things where at least a lot of us believe that AI can be used to solve them. Massive amounts of data, massive opportunity to find insight through correlating these data sets, combined with the massive compute capabilities. We can now start to do things we couldn't even imagine 5-10 years ago.
We don't have to go in order. It's always there. Somebody has to. So I'll just say, look, we can talk about the technical reasons why AI now and all the things about computational neural networks and deep learning and what has become possible both mathematically and computationally. But I think, we're talking about investing in AI. And I do want to make sure people realize that VCs are investing in AI because the entrepreneurs are building companies in AI. And it's as simple as that. It was no different than 2-3 years ago when every VC was talking about Bitcoin. Like half of them had no clue what the hell Bitcoin was. They were Googling and Wikipedia Bitcoin and still investing in that space. And the same thing is happening in AI.
Did you do that? Is that why, how do you know that so clearly?
It's true. It's true. The reality is, the simplest way to explain, and I've spoken to so many VCs who I can tell that they are not computer scientists looking at deep learning neural network frameworks. They will tell you, simply stated, you can now automate certain things that you could not do before, and it sounds like you can do that more intelligently than you could do before, and that's a good thing. Automation is a good thing, and if you can automate more complex tasks, more unknown and unfamiliar tasks, then that's a good thing. And I think for a lot of people, that refers to AI, and that means that applies everything from conversation and UI and commerce all the way to autonomous vehicles, drones, satellites, robots.
So, I have a quick question. How technical are you then? How much of the AI do you understand?
Did you learn it all on Wikipedia?
Or do you follow the buzzword?
Yeah, I Googled everything I could. To be honest, so maybe I can talk a little bit about Lux Capital because that's relevant here. We invest in a lot of deep technology companies. So I always say I'm not chasing the next Instagram and Snapchat, but I'm chasing the next Tesla and Nest. What that means is that our investments range very broadly, from nuclear waste management to satellites to drones to autonomous vehicles to virtual reality to biotech and early stage discovery of pharmaceutical compounds using machine learning tools. When you do that, I would be an idiot to sit here and say I'm an expert in all of these areas that I've invested in. The point is that I spend time with people who understand these spaces to understand, okay, magic, what does that mean? How do you build a business around it? What does that really mean in terms of building a long-term sustainable business? That's what we tend to invest in. And so we've invested in a whole bunch of AI-related companies, and I mentioned some of the ideas, from early stage biopharmaceutical discovery to application of AI to helping the blind people see. Am I an expert in each one of those areas? No. Do I understand enough about the computational capabilities required at the edge to be able to make some of the decisions where actual actuation needs to happen? Probably yes, but certainly I take technical advice when I can.
I just want to ask, do you have anyone on staff who's doing due diligence on the framework of choice?
Yeah, of course. So we have partners who are computer science, AI, and philosophy experts from Stanford and so on and so forth. So yeah, absolutely. And we're not trying to find the next Theranos.
Too soon? Too soon? I don't know. Well, you guys invested in some really, really cool deep tech stuff, and we've worked on a few different things together. But I'm coming at this from a slightly different standpoint. So Bloomberg Beta invests in companies that are transforming the future of work. And so we're generally agnostic to technologies. The reason I became obsessed with this space was circa 5 or 6 years ago, I was just generally obsessed with the data revolution, what ended up becoming big data. I'm sorry for using the term, I apologize. And about 3.5 years ago, I realized, a lot of what I'm in, and we made investments in sort of the big data stack. I realized a lot of what I'm investing in was not sort of where you're storing, processing, providing access to this data, but people who are using learning algorithms to help us with the plight of big data. Because what did big data do? It made the world this big. Our ability to process that data just as humans is not extended, and we're getting 10%, 20% better at that every year. And so what I became obsessed with was people who are using these algorithms to do this information synthesis to be able to provide us with the right insights at the right times. And so I'm very careful not to use the term artificial intelligence because I think it implies something that's on average more complex than what we're talking about. So we've got about 30 investments in our portfolio that are machine learning powered. I'd say probably only 20 to 30% of them are using neural network-based approaches. And again, it just has everything to do with the problem type. So we've got 3 vision companies in the portfolio. Of course, for computer vision, you're using these more AI techniques. But for the most part, a lot of the data types that people are dealing with are time series, they're text-based, they're audio. And so just basically the techniques people are going to use to build these intelligent solutions are going to vary.
I agree. I think all great points made. I tend to have a slightly different opinion than Bilal here. I do disagree that I don't think AI and Bitcoin can be used in the same sentence. There is a fad with Bitcoin, obviously, because I was trying to displace the medium of payment, which makes it unique, and that's why there was a bit of a craziness associated with it. But I think AI is real because machine learning has been around for a while, and some of the algorithms used in AI have also been, or in deep learning, have been around for a while as well. So it's really a step function. It's an advancement in the technology with the iterative computing capabilities that are offered in the cloud now. And so you can run these complex algorithms in a shorter amount of time, crunch large amounts of data, and produce meaningful insights. So that paradigm shift is what is enabling artificial intelligence today. And the second macro trend that we're seeing from companies also is that the new gen companies, the FANG companies, Facebook, Amazon, LinkedIn and Google, they're really pushing the bar on what can be done as a large organization. So them keeping their core functions but still allocating resources and talent to go develop next-gen technologies to advance the future is really getting a lot of other companies thinking about it, which is why we're starting to see a lot of founders who either leave these companies or are looking up to these companies to start companies in the deep learning and AI space. So I think this is a real trend that's going to grow.
And just one quick thing to make it really personal, like quite frankly, one of the reasons I started becoming obsessed with this space, so again, 100% focused on it right now, do a lot of research in the area, was because as a startup investor, I was constantly using these tools to hack my own life, and I made my output efficiency 3x better by virtue of using 10 to 15 of these sort of bleeding edge tools. And quite frankly, a lot of these tools didn't have monetization paths, but I was like, oh wow, I'm a knowledge worker. If I'm using this stuff to hack my own life already and getting such incredible results, I better just look at how this is going to affect enterprise broadly in every single industry.
What's happened to those companies? Have they developed any real monetization?
Some of them were always free tools, and so some of them still exist, some of them don't exist, and some of them I pay a lot of money for.
Yeah, I was going to ask, have you invested in any of them that you personally use?
Yes, Textio. I don't know if, has anyone in the audience heard of Textio?
The stickers on your laptop, right?
Yes.
Really into it.
I'm very proud.
I'd say one thing also, I didn't mean to say that, AI is bogus or anything like that. In fact, there's a lot of amazing things happening. I mean, we've invested across the stack. Well, that means that there's really like a company like Nirvana, which is building out the computational infrastructure for allowing certain types of deep learning tasks to be done efficiently, both in power and in cost. That's something that you would not do if companies were not using deep learning in their systems. When people realize, so that's one layer of the stack. It's at the infrastructure level. And then you have platforms, and the platforms, companies like Clarify and others that are image classification systems, right? And then you have application layer on top of it, which are, as I talked about, applications in human security. The idea that you can use camera-based systems to now really build a next-gen ADT type solution. There's real commerce, real economics there. We're not just talking about nice to have, but it's something that you really want, and it's very hard to replicate unless you spend thousands of dollars per home.
Okay, so the one that I have to jump in about before we sort of get into the specific ones that you guys also have invested in, which I'm curious about, is whether the market size of a general purpose image classification service, for example, Clarify, does have a huge opportunity. We saw MetaMind get acquired by Salesforce for an undisclosed sum, which means, in my world, that it's not big enough to be disclosed in an SEC filing. So what do you make of that?
So I can't tell you what that number was, and it's not as small as people think it is, but but I think, look, when you look at Clarify, I'll give you an example. We have a bunch of our own portfolio companies that are using Clarify solutions in their own applications, right?
Like
so
what are you talking about?
I have a company called Ira.io based in San Diego that's really building a AI-based system for blind people to see. Right? So in a blind person, you put a camera on their face, Snapchat is building that for you to take photos and post, but you put a camera on a blind person's face and you put a voice conversational UI to it, you're letting a blind man see that they cannot. So everything you can identify, the fact that you can identify this is a bottle of water is a really big fucking deal.
So do they pay a lot of money for that, to Clarify?
Of course. People are paying to Ira, and there's a relationship between Clarify and Ira is quite dependent on Clarify's solution to provide image classification services. People are, they recently, for example, had a blind person land at the airport, go out of the airport, take their baggage, go all the way to the side curb and take a cab and go home without any help from anybody else. Now, this is a person that otherwise the entirety of the tool set that they had was a white colored stick that they'll be banging on things and trying to make sure they don't trip over themselves, right? So image classification, how you utilize that makes a big difference. Right? Companies like Ring and Nest Cam or whatever they're called now, and they're all trying to build image-based security services. ADT people are paying tens of dollars a month, if not hundreds of dollars a month, to secure their homes. Right? What are you getting? You're getting basically nothing. Right? You're getting very simple motion detection alarm systems. Compare that to identifying, okay, I have kids playing outside, I want a camera system be looking at it. Would I pay $50 a month for that? Somebody who might have to pay $10, $20 an hour for a nanny to take care of this, sure, people would pay. So I think the market size is when you are trying to change something, when you're trying to imagine a solution that does not exist, on paper you can create a very large market size, and it all depends on what you end up focusing on. There are companies that are focusing, MetaMind had part of that solution as well, focusing on medical images and training on medical images. Again, it's a large market. I can't tell you what happened there and why they decided to sell, but certainly we have at least 5, if not more, companies in our portfolio that are using computational imaging for one sort of application or the other. And for each of them, we believe that these could be worth hundreds of millions of dollars as an enterprise value each, if not more than that.
Okay, how about you guys? What about that?
One application I've heard about from image classification is taking a picture of the food that you're eating and then uploading it to MyFitnessPal so it can tell you what calories you're consuming.
Right.
I mean, if you're going after applications such as those, it's really hard to justify the ROI and build a real company. But if you could go after some of the applications that he talked about, medical imaging and other real-world applications that could be more meaningful. I do have different ideas on where AI could go, and the more kind of pertinent ROI-driven use cases. But we can talk about it in a little bit. But image classification, to me, doesn't rank in the top 3.
Okay, so what about in your portfolio? Are there some that have clearer enterprise value?
So, specific for me, I really like the area of applying AI and deep learning to security. I think there's a lot of potential there. And the reason being, we have large amounts of data now that's coming through to enterprises to go analyze. Traditionally, enterprises just looked at the internal data, all the data that exists inside the firewall of an enterprise, of a data center, and then go make decisions on where breaches could be happening. But now there's this whole new plethora of data that's coming from external threats. So social media, web presence, IoT, there's a lot of external threat data where brands' sensitive information are being discussed. And so the ability to merge the two pieces of information, correlate them, and provide insights to the security operations team in real time is a really good application for machine learning and deep learning. And so as an example, one of our security companies, the one that I backed last year, a company called Jask, is trying to target the same exact pain point. Today, an average enterprise security operations team spends 400 hours a week dealing with false alarms. So that's 400 hours of precious manpower, labor time lost on dealing with alerts that have no meaning. So if you can have a system in there that can go in and prioritize these alerts based on what's the most crucial ones to focus on, you A, make your teams more efficient, and then B, they can also use their excess time in order to be proactive and use their skills as a preemptive hunting approach in order to prevent attacks from happening. So I personally think security is a very hot area for deep learning. Jask is one of them that we backed.
Okay. Nikolai, anything?
Sorry.
Is there a startup that you've invested in that has big commercial opportunity?
Yeah. So let's mention one that we just did. They're in the computer vision space, but more for 3D dimensional imaging, right? To allow the computer to really see in three dimensions. And called AI. I think they're in a panel a little bit later today. They're super exciting. What they've really done is they mimic the model of how the human brain does vision, right? To understand and perceive 3 dimensions. And that's really important because the brain is actually pretty good at this, right? If you look at a lot of things we've seen out there to do this, why don't the cars drive by themselves already and all the airplanes fly by themselves? Well, it's because this is a very, very hard problem to solve well enough, right? And it's lots of data. If you look at the self-driving cars that Google have, that little bulb at the top, it has rotating mirrors, lasers, and CCD elements, and it generates a massive amount of data and a massive amount of compute. And still with Moore's law, you need about a chunk of cores to compute all that data into a 3D model, right? So being able to build more efficient models to compute that, so you can run it locally, has immense value for cars, for things that fly, and so forth, right? So this is based on what these guys have done. It is super valuable right now. Everybody's talking about autonomous systems that move us around in transportation. It has real value, not just because it might reduce costs. We're talking about safety. We're talking about things you couldn't even do before. I don't know if you know this, but there was this Tesla released numbers that just their simple autonomous driving on the freeway reduce accidents by 50%, right? Sure. That's just the first step, right? So this company has very real commercial application and massive interest, of course, right? So that's one of the stuff we've done.
We've talked a lot about the technology and the applications, but that's not all that a smart investor would consider when they choose what to invest in. And I wonder if there are other factors that made you invest in the ones that you guys have mentioned so far. Was it their intrepid use of Café to go beyond anyone else's implementation of Café, or what was it? Was the person a former Googler who worked on some of the first image classification systems? What was it?
I'm happy to share. Well, since we brought up Textio, I'll use that as a first example, and I can just go down the list. Just for the record, all 30 of our machine learning-based companies have great market opportunities. So.
Yes, definitely, I'm sure.
But so we'll use Textio just because in a lot of ways it's an archetype of other companies I would love to see and love to be able to fund. So has anyone used Textio before? Anyone? Got a couple hands here. So essentially the way to think about it is spell check 2.0, right? And in the same way that you would never send out an email now without using spell check, which is, a checker on semantic and grammatical rules, this is domain-specific text optimization, right? And so they were looking at real estate postings, job descriptions. They could predict with 98% accuracy, whether a Kickstarter would get filled based on the actual natural language, involved in the post. And so how many of you have ever had to write a job description? This is where they started, hands up. How many of you think you're awesome at writing a job description? All the hands down, right? So there are a lot of these tasks that we have to do where we just aren't going to be an expert. We can't codify sort of, the best-in-class way to write a job description. And I'm sure you could go on the internet and read a whole bunch of books and become an expert, but it's an infrequent task, which means there's a lot being left on the table in terms of writing a description that's likely to fill quickly, to fill with a good candidate, and that's unbiased. So gender bias is kind of a huge issue in this area. And so what did Textio do? This is an archetype for a lot of different reasons, and one of the reasons is when we look at any data company, we look at it as sort of a three-part solution, right? There's the data inputs, there's the algorithmic component, and then there's the end user AI and the problem that's being solved. And the way we look at this is kind of like, in terms of relative importance, is kind of, has anyone ever gone to a really crappy hamburger place, ordered a hamburger, and, there's a giant bun at the top, a giant bun at the bottom, and then this like little sliver patty in the middle? And so for us, the algorithms are important, that you choose the right technology, but the other two things are so much more important. And so for them, what they did on the UI front, they basically made it look like Microsoft Word. And so what you would do is copy paste in your job description. It'll tell you out of 100, what percentile effective your job description is likely to be. And then what it will do is it will codify all that expertise in real time on your job description. So, it'll highlight words and phrases for you that it thinks are suboptimal. So for example, using the word candidate sucks because people can't imagine themselves in a job role, so they think you're sterile, so you should use a word like you. Or they'll even recommend, for example, including an equal opportunity statement just at the bottom of your job description, has huge returns, but I wouldn't know that. I've never put that in a job description before. And so they actually, on the front-end UI, they educate you about the changes you need to make. You're able to do it in real time, and they make it fun because of this sort of out of 100 gamification element, right? And then on the data side of things, this was, I think, the most impressive thing is, for all these horizontal companies, you always wonder, it's, how do they get a data advantage? And so what they did is on the front end, they partnered with a bunch of corporates who had all of these job descriptions, but not only the job descriptions, but the time to fill. What was the quality of the candidate? What were the demographic components of that candidate? And so what they're able to do is then provide features like, based on everything we've seen, is this a gender balanced job description? How can we fix that? So it was the data strategy and the front end UI that were the most magical thing about this company. And then the algorithmic components were very smart, but a lot of them are things you could pull out of NLTK 3.0, right? So.
I'd just say that, for all of our companies, we tend to invest in companies that happen to be technically very deep, and I don't mean that others don't. What I mean is that they're sort of solving a pretty complicated problem. They're building an autonomous car like Zoox, or they're flying autonomous drones like Sci-Fi, or they're building out this image classification services like Matt is building, or Nirvana when Naveen is building the infrastructure at the bottom of the layer to do the compute. So we find that in all of these companies that would get classified as machine learning, deep learning, AI, these guys are absolutely technical experts at that. In that category. These are not people who are building ad networks and, so, oh, let me do deep learning and let me try to solve some problem here. These are people who won ImageNet competitions. These are the people who worked at Google in these spaces or Amazon building out the frameworks and architectures there, came out of Intel or NVIDIA or Tesla and Uber now that acquired a bunch of these guys, and these guys are like, okay, I've spent my 2 years at Uber, I want to go out and do my own thing. And so you're finding out people who are technically very deep. They usually partner up with somebody who has sort of the Silicon Valley personality, the showmanship a little bit, the sort of, I'm going to change the world, and 1 trillion miles are traveled by people, and if it's $1 a mile, it's $1 trillion economy, holy shit, right? It is true, right? So it is true. And Uber is a good example of that, right? Who would have thought when iPhone was invented that the biggest company created on iPhone is going to be Uber, or the second biggest is going to be Snapchat, right? You wouldn't have imagined that. The best minds in the audience would have said it would be some productivity app doing some kind of spell check or some kind of Excel or Word or PowerPoint. Who would have thought it would be to call cabs? But so I think you find very deeply technical people realizing in Silicon Valley that you need to partner up with somebody who knows how to go out and accumulate the great talent and the great capital and then build out a company.
Just to build up on that point a little bit, I mean, given a lot of the room has founders here, just a word of recommendation or advice given the range of entrepreneurs that we've met over the past few months. As you're building out the company, think about how you want to solve the problem you're going after, right? There's two ways to go about it. You can go be a horizontal platform, be a generic platform that has applicable use cases in many different verticals, or you can go deep down in one vertical and be the best technology on offer in that particular vertical. And so, you can go build a horizontal platform, but then, there's different platforms out there with TensorFlow and deep learning for J or Cafe, or pick whatever language or platform that you like. But at the end of the day, if you want to build a real company with real revenue, going after a use case makes more sense. And so if you are building a vertical focused deep learning or AI company, I'd recommend, in addition to what what Bilal said, one is having a founder who has really deep technical expertise in deep learning or machine learning, and having somebody else in your team who has really deep domain expertise in that vertical you're going after. So ideally, if you're going after a supply chain market, you have a guy who really has supply chain DNA in him or her. Or if somebody's going after the retail market or the aviation industry, it just has to be some sort of unique domain expertise that you can bring in that can either maybe hard code or in some sense soft code into your product that really makes it stand out in addition to the powerful technology.
Yeah, so one is deep expertise in the space is really interesting to us when we look at founders. Like if you know the space, the domain you're going into really, really well. But I think the biggest thing for us, we don't really care if people work at Google or Facebook and so forth. They're great companies and they have high standards employing people. That doesn't mean they employ great entrepreneurs. Because some of the greatest entrepreneurs I know, they might take a job if Google twists their arm and give them, keys to the kingdom, but most won't. So our thesis is a little bit different. We try to, and we spend a lot of time, well, the reality is I never really had a real job. I built technology all my life and built tech companies. So and now been investing in tech entrepreneurs for 12 years, right? So I don't know much else about the corporate world in that sense, right? So when I look at people, I think I have a decent amount of understanding, and the rest of the team also deep in entrepreneurship. So deep understanding, is this an entrepreneur that's going after something that really matters to them? Will they go the distance? Is there great passion behind this? And are they excited about something that is big? If it's small, it's not a venture fundable company. It needs to be big. A big opportunity, big pain, big white space on the map, right? Sometimes there's non-consumption. Sometimes there's clearly defined incremental value. And then we try to assess their ability to execute on that. Leadership is one of the most important things. Deep technical skills, we love deep technical skills in how to execute on it, but also deep understanding of driving this into a product and to a scalable model, right? But leadership is key, and that's all about aggregating talent that's better than you. We talk about something we call, the assertive humbleness. You're very assertive of what you really, really, really know as a founder, and there are things you have no clue, and you're so open with that, saying, hey, I don't know how to figure this out. Do you know this? Do you want to come and join me and figure this out? Without that, you're not going to iterate fast enough and figure things out. No founder figured anything out. The ones that come and say, hey, we figured everything out, we just need a little bit of money. Sorry. If you believe that, you fooled yourself, right? So I can keep going a bit, but...
Yeah. But to your point on the passion, I think that's the biggest thing for us is pick a problem that actually matters in the world. And then there should be some reason that you're the person solving it, not anyone else. And the best way to test that is ask yourself, if I weren't able to raise money for this company, would I still be trying to solve this problem in the world? And so we've done a few investments in particular verticals. So we have 2 agricultural technology investments. And for both of those teams, they were obsessed with solving this problem of how can I increase crop yields and reduce the number of resources to do it. And so one's got a sensor-based approach, Thule Technologies, and one's got a vision-based approach, it's called Mavericks. But these guys guaranteed, had they not gotten funding, they would be solving this problem in the world. Same is true for an investment we made in a company called Deep Genomics. There's a fellow out of Jeff Hinton's lab who'd been pioneering deep learning for, I think, the last 18 or 19 years. And then 10 years ago, he was like, well, I could keep doing this for computer vision, but he had sort of a personal medical issue, him and his wife, and the uncertainty around, genomic tests not even being able to tell you what's wrong. In his case, it was an unborn child. He was like, why don't I just devote myself to something that actually matters? And so spent 10 years doing this, finally realized the potential, and that was the point at which he was like, look, I got to start a company because this is the only way to scale this to the rest of the world.
Great. Thank you. I just want to throw this out to questions. We have like 1 minute, so I hope that we're going to have a great... Okay, yes.
Assume this question is for Sean. The VC companies and your AI machine learning landscape is very good. How do you see that landscape evolving, assuming that we will have even more powerful machine learning technology?
So I think one of the things is so just context for everybody else, I do a report on the state of machine intelligence every year. And the whole point was just to visualize on one page, like what are the most major innovations that are happening right now. And so from the first time I did it 1.5 years ago to this time, the one thing we saw was this trend towards more highly autonomous systems. And so whether or not that, I'm hesitant to use the word chatbot, but whether or not that there are these autonomous text-based or audio-based agents that can interact with you dynamically, or in the physical world, these autonomous systems, we're seeing a huge push towards that. And so, as I think about doing the landscape next year, we're going to see more and more of those. The biggest changes are going to be, well, one, I think a lot of these horizontal platforms will either verticalize or choose to be acquired by, a company that has the data. And this is not a failure. This is, I was on the stage last week with Richard Socher, who's the CEO of MetaMind, and he was so thrilled because he's like, I've got this amazing data set to work on now. And so I think we're going to see that trend. And one of the fundamental challenges for me, I really care about machine intelligence kind of cutting across various different industries. And we're seeing more and more pop up, and I want those highlighted. So I'm like, how do I do this in one page next year? So.
Good luck.
I have one thing to add there, which is, we spent a lot of time as a fund focusing on machine intelligence, AI, focused interacting with physical devices, physical hardware. And while we talk a lot, and of course a lot of our companies benefit with Google and Amazon and all the cloud-based AI capabilities that are becoming available and open source, I think we will also start to see, both on the hardware, on the compute side, as well as the algorithm side, pushing it out to the edges, where a lot of that intelligence will sit at the edge and not necessarily go back into the cloud. So you'll have camera systems that are right now dumb. A drop cam is essentially a dumb device, which relies on the intelligence in the cloud. Will have chips on board to do intelligence on site. You will not have cars communicating into the cloud and doing the computation that's required off of the imaging and LiDAR data. They'll do it on the spot, or the drones. So I think that's something, for us, it's an opportunity both on the hardware side as well as the software side.
Thank you guys so much for sharing your thoughts. And if you want to talk with them more, find them later. Thanks.